Good morning, gentlemen. This will be the first of two videos specifically around the subject of game design and system design. This first video here is a direct response to a conversation about AD&D and BX. Now, the reason I want to bring this up and talk about this topic is because of the way the conversation is framed. It does get noticed a lot that D&D and then going into AD&D seemed to get a lot of actual play and play testing, and that this seemed to have an effect on it. But I don't know that this is as well understood as it could be, because it's not like BX didn't get played, but there's a big difference between the two games and how they developed, and as well as how subsequent games were developed and changed over time. And there was a post by user EOTB which goes into a lot of the big differences between AD&D and BX, and you'll notice that all of it is additional things that AD&D has, which additional complexity has been created in order to purchase additional depth in the game. And the result is that there's sort of a play counterplay thing going on. I believe it was referred to as 6-factor rock, paper, scissors. This means that in any given situation, there's a lot of thought has to go into it. It's like, okay, I'm going to do this, and then, okay, wait, now they did that, so, okay, we can respond in so many ways. If we do the thing that the default that we're going to lose, we need to think about, okay, we can use this other system, and we'll do this, and then you play counterplay, and maybe it goes up to 6 times, but 6 is just an arbitrary number. The point is that there is a system of possible options to look at and decide of which to use in any given situation, and how to respond properly in the game. And notice that the way the conversation is framed, and this is correct, this is not an apples to apples comparison. It's not an apples to oranges comparison. It's apples to a rock. It's not that AD&D is doing things better than BX. It's that it's doing them at all. It's engaging with the fact that it's a game at all. BX doesn't just do it differently or worse, it just doesn't do it at all. It does nothing. It doesn't attempt to solve these problems. So when you talk about actual play, it's kind of like, oh, AD&D got played and then got designed to support actual play, whereas this other game didn't. So what is it? It sounds like it's not even a game at all. It's not. And I wanna go into something here. I mean, take a moment to absorb what I just said. Jeez, that's pretty intense. But just the idea of actually designing a game system versus just tweaking some numbers, which is a big trap that I think people making games fall into. They underestimate what making a game is all about, because, Gary Gygax lived his life playing games and played a lot of games and had a whole bunch of experience with games, so he knew what he was doing with games. Whereas all these other games were made by failed authors, like BX, failed author. Beckme, failed authors. Just adding more failed authors to the fucking pile. And you look at all the new games that come out. Who are they? Failed authors. And the thing is, all that the failed authors know how to do is tweak some numbers. They look at it. They see a game being played. When actual play happens in their game, and a situation is sort of shallow or doesn't work, or like the players win too easily or lose too easily, their natural response is to just tweak the numbers. Like, oh, okay, the problem is that the numbers aren't right. I need to make a 2 into a 3, or a 4 into a 3, whatever. That's like the most basic level of designing a game, is to just tweak the numbers. Actually designing the system to have depth to it, purchased with complexity, is a whole other thing. And you'll notice one of the things that doesn't matter in this conversation, because of the way the conversation is framed, the question of whether AD&D succeeds is immaterial. It doesn't matter whether it successfully purchased depth for its complexity because it's the only game that attempted to purchase depth at all in the first place. Which I guess is why I view this hobby as a completely failed hobby. And I think part of that is because everybody who would have been good for the hobby went to make video games instead, which does kind of lead into my. I have some examples of system design versus tweaking, which all come from video games. So if you don't care about video games or don't know anything about video games, feel free to leave and with your head exploded. But my examples are Deep Rock and Vermintide. Vermintide is based on the Left 4 Dead franchise in some sense, and that has a lot of great counterplay in it. There are enemies who will pull you away from your teammates, kind of put you off balance. There are enemies who will cause area denial, so that you have to move out of the way. Like everyone has to move out of the way, or they can't, or they deny you from going to a place you were trying to get to. There are plenty of more examples, but and there's also items in the game. Man, you just picking up a healing potion during the course of the level, and then having to think about when am I going to use this and who is going to use it among the party. That's so much depth has just been purchased for so little complexity. You have one item and you can carry it. Then you look at Deep Rock. It has none of that. There are no items to pick up. It's just numbers get added to your numbers. The enemies are just bugs that just move blindly at you. There's no sense of like the team having to work together and getting pulled away from each other. And it's crazy because like the game is fun. It has cool player abilities, like the way you move around the level and the roles that each characters play, but it is not met in return by anything on the game side that creates a game. And I feel like this mirrors TTRPGs now, where 5e, for example, has all this cool stuff on the player side, and there's nothing you can do with it because it doesn't. It's not really a game. I don't know. My other example is just Overwatch, which is a great example of number tweaking. If we ever saw one, where when the game first came out, original Overwatch 1, cool roster of heroes, cool powers. Probably the most infamous example is Roadhog. This chain that you could throw and grab a player from the enemy team and pull him to your side, and this player is almost certainly dead at this point, unless they have like an ultimate or something that can get them out of this situation. And how did the developers respond to this being in their game? Gradually, over time, they whittled this power down to nothing, where it was worse than a gun. It was worse than just shooting because they changed the range to be so short. They tweaked the numbers to prevent the interesting thing from existing. Instead of engaging with the counterplay, the play counterplay, and having more interesting things, and all the interesting things that can counterplay other interesting things, they smoothed it all off. They streamlined it away. So, I do plan to write or record a follow-up video about this, which will be about going more into the complexity versus depth and success or failure at that. But I think this is good enough for now. So enjoy.